So at that point, what happens is both of them come to meet Krishna, and there are two chairs. One is a huge, very nice decorated chair that is, right next to the head of Krishna was sleeping at that time. But both of them being, cousins, they walked in because they had the freedom to do that. So there was a huge chair kept near the head of, the where you lie down and your head is. There's a huge chair there. And there was a small stool-like thing near the foot of the bed. So Duryodhana automatically went and sat on the big chair. And his reasoning is,
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this super exclusive episode of the Achievers Club podcast show. And this is something which is going to be really very interesting because today's podcast is going to be based on mythology. And today's guest is Nitten Nair. And in this particular podcast, we have dived deep into his own journey, why he started doing this particular thing that is mythology, and what is the similarity between every single human being on this particular planet Earth. And not just that, but we have dived deep into the history of Indian culture as well. And if you're someone who loves the history of our country of India, and not just that, but if you are willing to understand the history about the overall world as well, and along with that, there are a lot of interesting topics which we have discussed. Although this is something very unique for me as well, and this was like new learning experience for me as well. And I hope that even if you're not looking forward to study about mythology, about the ancient India, or even this particular world's past, but still you can enjoy this particular podcast from a point of view with an open-minded person, that how human beings are equal, how human beings are one. And make sure you watch this particular podcast with open mind, because even he has mentioned this particular term during the mid of that podcast itself. And the whole experience was actually very new for me, because even I'm very new to this particular term of mythology and all the ancient things and all. But please do make sure that you can also take full notes, and make sure you enjoy this particular podcast. And let's begin. Nitin Nair, sir, thank you so much for being on our podcast show. It's an honor for me that you are here, and finally, you accepted this opportunity to be as a guest on our podcast show of the Achievers Club. And first of all, for the very new audience, who is Nitin Nair? And like before jumping into the question, first of all, how are you doing?
doing great, doing great. It's a wonderful day today as well. It's not too hot. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
quite comfortable, in the afternoon, when we're having this conversation. And yeah, everything's looking good.
That's great. And who is Nitin Nair for the very new audience? Because today we are going to discuss something which is really very new to me, and I've heard about it. But honestly, till last few months, I was ignoring that concept even while I was listening to any podcast. But we are going to discuss about mythology, and we are going to dive deep into it in more interesting way, because you are like you are the kind of person who is making all the conversation a bit more funnier and interesting. So like, what's the value which audience is going to get? And definitely we are going to make it interesting so that they can watch till the end as well.
Yeah. So, to answer your first question, who is Nitin Nair? Now, people, live a lifetime trying to find the answer to that question. And, that's end of the day, that's, the essential question of existence. Who are you? Why are you here? But so far, what I can say is that I'm actually a seeker. I like to call myself a seeker because all my life, I've not stuck onto something. I've kept
Mhm.
moving. I've kept, going ahead and trying to find out new things. So if you look at the way that, I've grown as well, I did my graduation in hotel management. I watched the movie Cocktail, the Tom Cruise version, not the Saif Ali Khan version, the Tom
Mhm.
Cruise version, and decided that being a bartender is probably the best thing in the world. And I was a bartender at one of the top hotels and nightclubs in Mumbai at one point of time. And I moved to Bangalore then, and deciding that there's one more level to this that I need to go to. That's beverage consulting. And I
Mhm.
moved there and I did a lot of private parties. The same way you order food, I used to be the bar guy. So you call me and I used to come there and take care of the drinks of any party, whether it's a private party, a public function, etc.
Mhm.
Then I realized that probably I am doing something wrong, because at the end of the month I didn't have any money left. I'm doing good business. I'm
Mhm.
having regularly having work, but I didn't have any money. So I thought probably an MBA is the answer, so that I can get to manage my finances. And I think after I joined, I realized that this is not what it's supposed to be, because I joined an MBA thinking they're going to teach me how to run a business, but
Mhm.
what they were trying to do teach me is how to do a job. So I quit midway, After my first year, I dropped out, and then I dabbled in a lot of different things. I had my own event management company at one point of time. I manage a rock band at one point of time. A lot of things, that I was doing. And then finally, I got admission into a program which I had been, really looking forward to. So I went and did my master's in creativity and innovation from the Edward de Bono Institute at the University of Malta.
Mm-hmm.
So that, 1.5 years was a real eye opener for me, because as far as I'm concerned, it started making you think in ways that you don't regularly think. Because many of us, an idea is, you're probably, sitting on the toilet and suddenly an idea comes, and that's creativity. But
Mm-hmm.
there is a structured science behind it, and you can force yourself to be creative. You can force yourself to be innovative in any given situation. So once, I got that done, I figured that the most happening industry, or the most happening vertical at that point, was digital marketing. And
Mm-hmm.
probably, bringing all these concepts into digital marketing might work. And I moved to Dubai from Malta, and I started working in, a boutique agency, where I slowly, moved to the head of the social media department and head of digital media. Then I moved to different companies within Dubai, and finally I landed in India, when I decided that, even after 22 years of living in Dubai, means I was born there and brought up there. I came back and
Mm-hmm.
went back, etc. I was no better off than a camel. So I decided, let's move back to India. And I moved back, and I started working for a company in Coimbatore. That's where I'm settled right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically 3 hours from my hometown. And I figured that, it's close enough so that, I don't have to visit my mom every day. And it's
Mm-hmm.
far enough that, I can, what you call, probably, I drop by for 3-4 days and come back.
Mm-hmm. That's
So,
true.
so it's a perfect distance. That 3 hour radius is perfect. And what happened was, what changed, the way that I work and, what I do, was COVID. So when COVID started, an extremely extrovert person like me, who loved to, be around people, was forced to sit at home. And
Mm-hmm.
that frustration slowly starts to build up, and you want to vent it out somewhere. You want to do something. You want to keep yourself busy, because work was happening, but then it all became about work.
Yes.
So, there's no nothing else. There was no line differentiating what is work, what is home. So then I started to look around and see what I can do. And it started off as a small blog. I called it Mythlok,
Mm-hmm.
because myth is, the mythology of stories, and
Mm-hmm.
lok is the people, the Hindi word lok,
Yes.
people, which I bought in. And I started, just documenting different characters from mythology that I read about. And because mythology was something that I was really interested in from a very long time. So what I did was just started documenting it. And with every passing day, I started looking at it as a way to, really connect people.
Mm-hmm.
Because when people started reading the website, and they're like, oh, I'm from Philippines, but we have a similar character there. Or I'm from, the Cherokee tribe, and, we believe in this. So
Mm-hmm.
when you start getting comments from people in that way, you start looking at things from a very much broader lens. And 2.5 years now, I've been working on the site, and currently, we are doing very well. We're getting a lot of traffic from around the world. In fact, I would say there's probably 3 or 4 countries from where we don't have people visiting the site in the whole world.
That's
And
amazing.
what else has happened is, in June, I decided to, quit my job
Mm-hmm.
and look into Mythlok full time. So right now I'm working on Mythlok, the website, the YouTube channel, the podcast, as well as I'm writing my own novel, which has a, influence of the mythologies and stuff that, I've been exposed to over time. And that's what I'm doing right now. And that is Nitten Nair so far. 2 years later, when you ask me the question, this might be completely different.
Mm-hmm. So that's amazing. And even looking up at your journey, it feels like you're exploring life. And as you mentioned, like the word seeker itself. So you're seeking for like the inner, like you can consider the inner spirit thing, and you're looking forward for new thing every now and then. That's great.
Exactly, exactly. There is this big misconception, like we're taught when we are young, right? We
Mm-hmm.
say we say that a rolling stone gathers no moss. So,
Mm-hmm.
you should learn to be at one place. But then my whole point is, a rolling stone at least goes places. You know,
Yes.
it sees things and it gets exposed to so many different things. And I believe that that is very important as an individual when you grow and, you know, as you get older, because if you can speak about, let's say, 100 different things, there's a chance that, you know, you can influence 100 different people. But if you've done just one thing all your life, you can
Mm-hmm.
only talk about that one thing, and the number of people that you can influence or impart your knowledge to becomes limited. And I
Mm-hmm.
look of it like, as a parent to a 7-year old, I want to expose myself to as many things which might be of interest of my son later on. And then I can, you know, probably guide him in that manner. For
Mm-hmm.
example, if my son, let's say, he wants to become an artist, yeah, I know a fair bit of design now, and, you know, what design works and how animation works. Although I can't animate anything, you know, to save my life. But I've spent enough time with those kind of people to know how, you know, my son can probably look at art in a different way. It's probably not paintings. It might be animation. It might be 3D. It might be something else. So the
Mm-hmm.
more people you can touch, all depends on how much you've exposed yourself to different experiences.
Mm, that's
And
great.
that I feel is very important. And I love the fact that, you know, the younger generation, especially guys like you know, you are open to so many different things. And people like there are us in our generation have been opening doors for you to do a lot more things, you know. So that becomes a big factor that comes into play.
Hmm, that's true. And even as you mentioned about the concept called as like we should explore a lot of things. Even this is one thing which I learned from this book. I think it was Rich Dad Poor Dad or Cash Flow Quadrant. It was like you should learn a bit about a lot of things rather
Hmm.
than
Exactly.
learning a lot of things in a bit. Like as you
Exactly.
mentioned about you can learn about ABC of, let's assume, 100 things rather
Hmm.
than learning A to Z about any one thing. It would be a great exposure about what is that field all about and how we can hire people so that they can work and we can spend or invest our time in the things which matter to us and which can create a bigger difference in this world. So I think that's a very good answer to the question, although like I'm not into mythology, so that is why I've created certain set of questions. And as you mentioned about your own journey as well, and as you mentioned about like how you started this particular website, and like we are looking forward that your website becomes the world's biggest mythology website
Thank you
where
so
people
much.
are exploring everything about mythology on your own website. So can you explain a bit more? Let's assume I'm a person who is completely unaware about what is mythology, and what would be your definition of mythology according to you to that individual?
Okay, so, you know, in a way that I don't hurt anyone. So, you know, what happens is mythology is a very personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because of the fact that we are from India, and the Indian mythology is closely related to, you know, the Hindu dharma or the Sanatan dharma that most of us follow.
Yes.
Like, you know, what happens is we start associating mythology with religion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But that concept, unfortunately or fortunately, does not exist with Christianity, because there isn't a Christian mythology, and there is no Islamic mythology.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's purely a religion as a standpoint. But in Hinduism, because our culture is so old, 5,000, 6,000 years old, and it's been a constant line of a belief system that's not been interrupted. Even today, when we talk about mythology, we think of it as that pertains to religion.
Yes.
Yeah. On the other hand, I prefer to believe that mythology is related to the culture of a region. Okay, you find Egyptian mythology. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Egyptian mythology is evident. No one can deny that, you know, what you call, the pharaohs didn't exist and they didn't believe in Ra and Tefnut and Het and Bes and Bastet and all these gods, because the pyramids are there.
Yes.
You know, there's drawings inside the pyramids, there's tablets that have been recovered. But Egypt as a country does not follow any of those belief systems anymore. You know, it's an Islamic country. So for them,
Mm-hmm.
their mythology is very different from their religion.
Religion.
So
Okay.
it's all about the Egyptian culture. If you talk to an Egyptian, they say, yes, this is our history. This is what, you know, our ancestors used to believe in, but we
Mm-hmm.
believe in this. So they maintain a balance. Even if you look at, you know, let's say Christianity, now the home of Christianity or the Roman Catholic Church is in the
Mm-hmm.
Vatican City, right? But you've heard of Roman mythology, which has nothing to do with that religion.
Mm-hmm.
You have Hercules, you have, you know, all Jupiter, Juno, all these gods there who have nothing to do with the modern Christian religion. because it is something totally different. If you look at these islands in Polynesia, Micronesia, etc., they constantly refer back to their ancient belief systems, and that is their mythology. So mythology is all about the culture of a particular place and what those people believed in at one point of time, the stories that they created to answer questions that they didn't know the answer to. To give you a small example, why is the moon what you call less brighter than the sun? Now, science will say
Well,
because moon does not emit light of its own. All
mm-hmm.
it does is it reflects the light that comes from the sun, it hits the moon, comes back to earth, and that is what gives us light.
Yes.
Because it is not a direct source from the sun, and the sun is so much more bigger than the moon, the sun is brighter than the moon, right?
Yes. This is what I've
Now,
heard.
in Philippine mythology, when you look at it, it's because the moon goddess Mayari has only one eye.
Okay.
She got into a fight with the moon god, with the sun god Apolaki. And what they happened is because they both wanted to rule the world. Yeah, they got into a fight and Mairi lost. And in that battle, her one eye, she became blinded. So
Mm-hmm.
when the battle ended and they decided that, okay, day and night, we will rule over these two things. And she started ruling. Because of one eye is not there, the light that she emits is less.
Okay. So this is a
Okay.
very deep concept.
Yeah. So this is the concept in Philippines. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So mythology, and this is what the people in ancient times believed because they did not know the science that, the of light to the moon and then reflection back. They didn't know that. So they had to come up with an answer. And mythology was a way they came up with these answers.
Okay.
This is how it happened. Um,
Mm-hmm.
to give you another example, if you look at Africa, yeah, and there's a tribe called the Kuba tribe. It's predominant mainly in Ghana and Western Africa. How they believe that the world was created is because there was a god called Bumba, and one day he was, there was nothing, there was only darkness, primordial darkness, and Bumba was there. Bumba or Mombo, they refer to him in two names. And one fine day he was getting, bad stomach pain, and he started vomiting. So when he started vomiting out, what he vomited became the earth, the moon, the sun, the stars, all the creatures inside. It came from inside him.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the answer they gave to how the universe was created,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But we all accept today that the world was created because of the Big Bang theory, and it's millions of years old. So
Mm-hmm.
all these people, all these different cultures had to come up with answers, because even then people ask those questions. How was the world created? How was human beings created? Why is the sun darker? Why is there a solar eclipse? Why do the waves, come here? Excuse me. So all these answers had to be answered. And it was always answered in a cultural reference.
Mm-hmm.
So, cultures that were closer to the oceans always had an oceanic element to it. Closer to the mountains always had a mountaining element to it. So it all depends on those cultures, and you can understand a lot of these ancient cultures from mythology. So, as far as I'm concerned, mythology is the stories that people told about our universe and our existence much before we all came into the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what I believe mythology is. Although there are, two cultures which I've seen. One is our Indian this thing where, because like I mentioned, the worship or the line has not been interrupted for almost 5,000 years.
Yes.
We look at mythology as itihasa,
Yes.
okay, or history. We consider it actual history that happened. The
Yes.
Mahabharat happened, Ramayana happened. Now, if there was a break anywhere in between these 5,000 years, even for 100 years,
Mm-hmm.
we would not be looking at it in that way as itihasa, because there was that break. But since it was, continuous, we believe that it is itihasa. And similarly in Chinese mythology as well, all these gods, etc., the Jade Emperor and all the gods in the Chinese pantheon, they've all been officially recorded as people who existed. And that's I don't know whether it was a governmental thing that happened 100 years ago or some of that, but most of the characters in Chinese mythology have been accorded an actual space in their history of Chinese culture or the Chinese country or the geography. So these two cultures are the ones who have actually looked at mythology as actual happenings of the past and still believe it's maintained. Although most religion, whoever follow these belief systems, continue to believe that it is true and it exists. But only two cultures actually maintain it that this is actually our history and believe
Mhm.
it completely.
So it's India and China who have maintained their past.
Yeah, in different ways. Like we believe it is itihasa, and
Mm-hmm.
they have actually documented it, saying these people have lived before.
Okay,
Now,
that's
if you look at, for example, the Mayans in Mexico and central Mexico, they don't have people practice. There are very few people practicing those ancient beliefs right now. So
mm-hmm.
for them, it's more or less, what they say, that this is how things were, is all about, a belief or, oral tradition that's passed down. Nothing is written anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the Cherokee tribe or the Hopi tribe in the US, they still have all these belief systems, which probably they still used to do 300, 400 years ago. But once again, it's not documented. It's oral tradition. It's passed down orally. So from generation to generation.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the Asian cultures, most of us have it documented somewhere. But it's these two cultures who actually look at it and say, this is our history, and, still maintain it even today.
Mm-hmm. So for the audience who is completely unaware about this concept, to break it down, like you can correct me if I'm wrong. Mythology is all about, let's assume there were people, those who lived in past, and whatever life they lived, let's assume they were living, and during their life they had a lot of questions which came into their life, came into their mind. They used to ask each other, they used to answer each other, and based on their own study, based on their own cultural beliefs and practices, they used to mention about the universe, how universe came into existence, how earth was created, and like their own past itself. And then they used to document it, and then it's like what it got fast forwarded towards this life. So let's assume whatever the past life was, that's our mythology. And let's assume the people, those who will come up after, let's assume 500 or maybe 1,000 years down the line, for them we will be their mythology, we will be their ancients, right?
Exactly. And I sometimes joke around saying that in future, when people come and let's say 100 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
someone watches an episode of Game of Thrones or Lord of Rings, will
Mm-hmm.
believe that this what actually happened in the past, and this is what our people used to believe in. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't know how people will interpret it in the future. But
Mm-hmm.
as long as there are written records for everything, it generally tends to get saved and generally tends to get passed on a lot
Mm-hmm.
easier, rather than if it's just purely oral.
So like if it's like an oral conversation, so there's a possibility that it can get changed based on
Exactly.
person's perspective. Let's assume I'm telling you something. So like let's assume I'm telling you about ABC thing. So based on your perspective, you can change it to BCD, and then
Yeah.
for the other person, they can change it to CDE and so on. So in that way, it could get like it's in Hindi like Rai ka pahad bana diya. That could also happen in
Exactly.
that thing, where even if
Exactly.
they were correct, they made it wrong, or even if they were wrong, by just you can consider by layers of people coming in, by layers of information coming in, they converted into right or wrong, like vice versa, right?
Exactly. And it can also be that the person who is receiving the information
Mm-hmm.
understands it completely wrongly.
Yes,
And
that's true.
then he passes it on, that wrong information, to someone else. And
Mm-hmm.
then that information, gets passed on. So, the good thing that I feel about, Indian mythology in particular is that we have the Vedas, we have the Puranas, Upanishads, we have Mahabharata, and all these things have been documented. We
Mm-hmm.
have still have copies, or not copies, or I would say iterations of the Vyasa Ramayana or the Vyasa's Mahabharata, that was written, the original one. So
Mm-hmm.
we know a lot. We have a lot of written records from that time. Now, if you look at, let's say, um, civilizations that no longer exist. For
Mm-hmm.
example, the Incas in South America. Yeah. Only thing that we know is what we have understood from their monuments, from their carvings, from their pottery which was got. So we assume that these are the mythology stories,
Yes, that's true.
but we don't know for sure whether they even called, for example, Kukulkan, which is a feathered serpent god, or one of the most important gods in their pantheon. We don't know if he was actually called Kukulkan. It was just what we think they called him because of what is written in different what we found written on monuments or in pottery or somewhere. But there was never a written account saying this is our story, top to bottom. This is how we, looked at things. So that isn't there.
Mm-hmm. So it's like the belief itself.
It's a belief system.
Mm.
So belief systems can change with time. It changes with new ideas being introduced. And but at the end of the day, the core questions all remain the same.
That's true. Like how universe was created, how Earth got into
Exactly.
existence and all. That's true. And let's just dive deeper into it. Like we discussed about what mythology is all about. So let's assume we are discussing about mythology, and the people, those who are watching this podcast, like how, let's assume they are taking certain aspects from Indian mythology, the ancient things which happened in India. You mentioned about a lot of past things which we have in the form of proof and which actually existed. So let's assume we are taking those things, not just by, let's assume, not just by reading it, but let's assume we are taking certain practices from those Vedas, Puranas, and all. So how can those impact in this modern society where we are in a generation where people don't even like to talk to each other? They are just on their phone, on their laptops, and doing all of this stuff.
So, we can look at it in a couple of ways. One, you can always, I've always loved looking at mythology from around the world as inspiration for innovation. Yeah, I've done a TED talk also once, based on the same topic, how you can use mythology or Indian mythology as a source of inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, there are certain things that happen in mythology that at that point of time was considered magic or, the power of God. To give you an example, that Dhritarashtra, the king in Mahabharata, the uncle of the Pandavas and the father of the Kauravas, he was blind. Yeah. But, and he was inside his palace during the Kurukshetra war, but he knew what was going on exactly at every single point of time because his companion Sanjaya was given
Mm-hmm.
the power to see what is going on in the battlefield and, continuously relay it to the king so that he knows what is going on. So at that point of time, what did we look at it as? It is a blessing by God, a special gift given by Krishna, so that Dhritarashtra knows what is happening. If you look at that in modern times, I don't see it very different from a live telecast of cricket match that we see.
Mm-hmm.
Something's happening somewhere halfway across the world, and we are seeing it in real time, or we are hearing about it in real time,
That's
right?
true.
So, when some concepts like this come up, smart minds, creative minds can actually use this to think of modern day solutions for, for anything that happens. Now, I'm not claiming that, that is the inspiration for live telecasting. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
saying, giving you an example. Another, example that you can look at it is in terms of, the philosophy behind many of the things. Okay, if you look at mythology or as a philosophy or how you should behave, though there's plenty of lessons for business, for what you call, for example, uh, the in Mahabharata itself, because it's one of my personal favorites in
Mm-hmm.
terms of mythological books. Mahabharata, the whole gambling episode where Yudhishthira was gambling away. First, he gambled away his riches, his kingdom, everything. One by one, he gambled away his brothers. Then he gambled away himself, and then he gambled away his wife. Now that becomes an ethical question that you can raise. It becomes from a legal standpoint, a person who is no longer himself, like he is gambled away himself already.
Yes.
So he does not own himself. That means he has nothing left. So
Mm-hmm.
does he have the moral right to gamble away his wife? Because he's gambled away his freedom anyway already.
Yes, true.
So then from a legal, you can look at it from a legal perspective nowadays. Like, for example, if you have declared bankruptcy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the right to enjoy the riches that your immediate family members have?
Absolutely no.
So these questions can be raised. There's a lot of learnings that we can take, but the important part is we should have the maturity to relate it to our modern times, right? And to accept the fact that it is not something that is we are taking it in its actual form. Like, for example, there are people who go to the extremes of saying that oh yes, in that part, in that story, they were drinking a black liquid which had bubbles in it. That means we discovered Pepsi long before. Pepsi belongs to us. those things, don't make sense. That's generally not the way. But if you look at it from a philosophical way, if you look at it from a place of being in paradox where, you're conflicted and you want to look for answers, there's plenty of answers in Indian mythology. And for example, the Bhagwad Gita itself is a book on answers to questions, moral dilemma. People look at it like, the word of God, like a message from God to the world, which, is what the Quran is, or which what the Bible is, or the Mormon book is. They're all messages from, sorry, that's my dog there, don't mind. Yeah. So that's it's a message from God to the world. But how I look at the Bhagavad Gita is a compilation of man's existential moral dilemma, which is being answered by someone. So if you actually read the book, it's all about Arjuna asks a question, should I do this? I have this on one side, I have this on one side. What should I do? And Krishna provides the answer. So if you look at it from that way, you get most of your life's problems solved from the Bhagavad Gita. And that's what the Bhagavad Gita has been doing all these years.
Yes, that's true. Like it's
helping
like,
people answer their
yeah.
own problems.
So even I think, like, honestly, I've not read any part of any of the Vedas, Puranas, or anything, even about Bhagavad Gita as well. And this is for the very first time I'm exploring about the past thing. So as you mentioned about Bhagavad Gita, in a way that it was like a scripture which was created in past from greatest of the greatest people, and it's like the answers which were written in that particular script, those are still relevant, right? And
Exactly.
people find out, like, whatever day-to-day problems we have, we can actually get answers to all those questions, all those problems, with the help of Bhagavad Gita, or even other, let's assume, any other scriptures also.
Exactly.
Okay, that's great. And even I'm
So,
exploring a lot.
so if to give you another example, this is one of my favorite examples. So there is this small portion in the Mahabharata, once again, where, all the armies have been divided up. All the kingdoms, they've decided, okay, I'm going to side with the Kauravas. I'm going to side with the Pandavas, which itself is a big lesson in diplomacy. How you go about, because getting people on your side, because they're all relatives at the end of the day. They're all related by marriage in some faction. So, it becomes very difficult. And what happens is the only person left, or the only army left, is Krishna's army from Dwaraka. Yeah. So both of them want the army to be with them. Arjuna comes from a different intent because, he has a huge respect for Krishna. He wants Krishna to be involved with on their side. And Duryodhana comes with the intent that the resources that the Dwaraka army has in terms of manpower, in terms of wealth, etc., is huge. And, that will be a huge addition to his army. Yeah. So at that point, what happens is both of them come to meet Krishna, and there are two chairs. One is a huge, very nice decorated chair that is, right next to the head of Krishna was sleeping at that time. But both of them being, cousins, they walked in because they had the freedom to do that. So there was a huge chair kept near the head of, the where you lie down and your head is. There's a huge chair there. And there was a small stool-like thing near the foot of the bed. Okay, which, was part of the internal decoration, etc. The two chairs kept. So Duryodhana automatically went and sat on the big chair. And his reasoning is, okay, I'm an actual king, so I deserve, a big chair, and I'm going to be sitting near his head, so that, when he wakes up, he'll see me. So Arjuna, because, Krishna is a friend, and, he's generally more humble in his approach, because they believe that, Krishna is, much more than what everyone sees. He chooses to sit in that small stool near the feet. In some time, Krishna wakes up. Yeah. Now, what do you do when you wake up? You wake up and you sit up. You look straight ahead.
Yeah.
So you don't see the person sitting near your
Yeah.
head. You see the person who's sitting near your feet. And he says, hi, Arjuna, what are you here for? So now, technically, he's seen Arjuna first.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what happens is then, the discussion goes on, and Krishna gives the option that, listen, both of you are here. Okay. And so I cannot let both of you go. Either one of you go from here empty-handed. So I'll give you the option. There's me on one side, there's my army on the other. You can actually have me, or you can have my army. Okay. And since I saw Arjuna first, I'm giving you the first choice. Now, Duryodhana got very angry. He's like, no, I came here first. I entered the room first. I sat on the chair first. Krishna said, I'm sorry, but I saw him first. His choice. And Arjuna had his answer. He said immediately, like, I want you to be on our side. It's not your army. And Duryodhana was happy because Duryodhana wanted the army. He did not think that, having Krishna on your side would be of much help. And he said, okay, fine, I'm happy with this. And they went off. So this situation itself is like, when you're faced with a tough choice of, when you're a manager, you're faced with a tough choice. There is this guy who's been, there first. He joined the company first. And now you have to promote someone. So who do you choose? What is their motive behind the promotion that they want? So to finalize that and how to come up with an agreement where everyone is happy, diplomacy. A lot of these things come into play. So, work conflicts at work can easily solve them with all these stories that, is there in Indian mythology. Now, there are similar stories in all the other mythologies. I'm just mentioning Indian mythology because you brought that up in particular.
Yeah. So are there any similarities and dissimilarities, as you mentioned about the similarities? Like there are a lot of similarities in a lot of mythologies of across the world and similar as of Indian mythology itself. So what are the dissimilarities which you have observed so far?
To be honest, Sahil, there's more things common between all these mythologies and things are not and dissimilarities. And that's something which I've realized because when you look at, let's say, Indian mythology and then you look at Filipino mythology, you would automatically assume that there's hardly any connection. One is a mainland country, other is a group of islands. The people are completely culturally different. Languages are different. You can say, scientifically, even your racial, this thing is different. Okay. But if you look at the mythologies around the world, or even these two in particular, you will notice that there are a lot of all these natural elements: sun, wind, thunder, lightning, fire, earth, water, seas, rivers, all of them have been godified. There's a God for everything. There's a God with a responsibility for everything. And if you look at any polytheistic belief system, polytheistic meaning there are multiple gods, you will find that all these natural elements that happen have someone who's assigned to it as it's their responsibility. Childbirth, fertility, agriculture, rain, wind, you name anything that we as human beings are exposed to in our life. There is always a God whose role is to help out humans in that factor. So when you have, let's say, a god of thunder in Indian mythology, you have a god of thunder in Norse mythology, you have a god of lightning in Norse mythology, you have it in let's say Celtic mythology, you have it in Mayan mythology. All of them, would have a common element to it. For example, Indian mythology is Indra, you have what you call Thor, you have Taranis, you have Perun, you have Perkunas, you have Tlaloc, all these gods from different mythologies. All of them, their weapon is a lightning bolt or the Vajrayudha, what we call. They always have it in their hands. They're always in the sky. Their anger causes thunder. And when they, angry, they shoot people down with a bolt of thunder. It's common in all the mythologies around the world. You know, the only thing that differs is the way culturally how you perceive all these different gods or how you try to worship them. For example, like culturally in the Celtic mythology, people believe that yes, they're there. Celtic is, the UK, Ireland, and Scotland, that area. They believe that, yes, we had a thunder god and they had a lot of rain. Okay. So they used to pray to the thunder god, please be nice to us. Don't, give us too much rain that we can't handle. And even today, it's predominantly a very gloomy, rainy kind of a region.
Yes.
If you look at India, we used to what you call, say, God, please give us more rain so that our agriculture gets better. Okay. People living in, let's say, coastal areas will say, don't give us too much rain because otherwise our houses will be flooded. So what you ask for and how you place the God in that wide pantheon is cultural. But the core element of, that particular God is probably common in more cultures than it is different.
So even
You have snakes being, worshipped in different cultures in different ways. For example, Dambala in Africa, he's considered to be the cosmic surgeon who helped create. And when he moves, when his scales rub against each other, that is the cause for earthquakes. And and he's there and he's moving constantly. And which is one of the concepts that we have, that the earth rotates or revolves on its own axis. You
Mhm.
have Falak from Arabian mythology, which is considered to be I think, the sixth or seventh level of hell. It has the power to consume the whole universe, but does not, because it is scared of God or Allah or whoever is, there in that mythology. If you look at Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan from South American mythology, again a snake. That snake has come and given knowledge and wisdom to the people. In Indian mythology, we have snakes like, Sheshnag, etc., who are Vasuki, who are all part of the gods and have different roles that they play. In Papuan or Papua New Guinea or Polynesian cultures, snakes have been known to be protectors. So you have the core element, and how a snake actually functions in that culture becomes the way that it is worshipped.
Okay, so let's assume there is one element, XYZ element. So based on the culture, based on, let's assume, like let's take India, as you mentioned, like we are through ancient itself, and we have not broken that chain of ancient thing to the current scenario. So we have that past, let's assume that past bringings and past culture into us. But there are a lot of you can consider a lot of locations, as you mentioned about Egypt and all. They have the past culture, but it's not resonating with the current sense, right?
Ex-
So based on that particular thing, that XYZ thing, whatever we were taking as an example, so it means different to Indian culture, it means different to Egyptian culture, it means different to Philippine and others as well, right?
Yeah. And it's not, that is when you look at it from a modern day perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Even in olden times, it was mainly because of the location or your culture where you were. Okay. Because if you look at all these elements, people who are living in an island, okay, let's take the same example of a snake. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
People living on an island, for them, their snake would be water based. It would be a sea snake. It would
Yes.
live in the seas. It would protect the shoreline. People who live on the, let's say, the main heartland or this thing, it would be, a snake would be something that lives in a cave. If people are living in an area where it's prone to earthquakes, they live in under the ground. Snakes live under the ground, and that's where they are. People in
Mm-hmm.
mountainous regions believe that a snake could fly because that's the only way it can travel, in between all the mountains. It cannot
Mm-hmm.
crawl up the mountain, so it has the ability of flight. And these same snakes, in certain mythologies, they have slightly transformed into dragons. Chinese mythology, Southeast Asian mythology. End of the
Mm-hmm.
day, dragons are serpents with arms and legs, and they all have their own role to play. In
Mm-hmm.
some cultures, snakes are considered to be, most cultures, they're considered to be good. They're not bad. They're all
Mm-hmm.
there for a reason to help protect you. But
Yes.
if you look at modern times, the snake is probably the biggest reason why in modern Christianity, we have all these issues. As in, the snake convinced Eve to take a bite of the apple.
Mm-hmm.
And when Christian religion was started spreading around the world, that started having clashes because it portrayed the snake as evil. So, if you look at places where, the Spanish actually went ahead, the Spanish Inquisition or the Spanish conquistadors, they were the
Mm-hmm.
ones who actually went ahead and were spreading, the Roman Catholic religion, conquering
Mm-hmm.
places. So they bought their belief systems. And what happened is, people who are intrinsic to that region started imbibing the new religion that was bought by the Spanish. So in a lot of places, you will see that the current, traditions are a mix of both their olden traditional beliefs and modern beliefs from the modern religion that they have bought in. So it
Mm-hmm.
becomes and it's good. Everything should get mixed. There should be, a good mix of belief systems happening, tolerance happening for all things. So you'll see that many places where the conqui- uh, conquests have succeeded, they have a nice mix.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, again, that is cultural. So that's what I keep, bringing the word culture, culture, culture up. Because if you go down to Africa, let's say a huge part of the African population is either Christian or they are Muslim. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the way they perceive even the modern religion of Islam or Christianity is by bringing in elements that their ancestors told them is their belief system. So you will find saints whom you might be saints who, let's say, the Hausa tribe in Africa believe in, whom, let's say a Christian sitting in the UK might have never heard of. So it's a cultural thing. There might be saints in India. We have different sections of Christianity in India as well. There are saints whom we revere who probably would be completely alien to a Christian in Australia. So again, it becomes cultural. So with time, I believe that even the two modern religions, the two biggest modern religions, they will also seamlessly blend into the culture and become it's just 2000 years old technically. So give it a couple more thousand years, and once again it becomes part of the modern mythology of that age, and people will look at it with a lot more cohesion, because it's part of their culture. They can see their own culture in its past.
So in the sense, like whatever cultures have started recently, like few years back, hundreds and thousands of years back, they need few more years so that that becomes like the dominant culture of that particular space.
Exactly. So
That's it.
so to give you a small example, like if you look at Southeast Asia, okay, Thai mythology is very prominent, very vibrant. They have a huge history of being inspired by Buddhism, by Hinduism, okay, and modern day, being inspired by Christianity, by Islam. So they have a very vibrant mythology. In some areas, you will find that people still believe in a lot of things that we consider urban legends today. Yeah. Then you move to Malaysia. Malaysia is a Muslim country with a Hindu heritage. Okay, like even today, their national airlines is called Garuda. So you can see that. So they've kept their tradition or their mythology alive, and they've accepted the fact that we are a Muslim country, and this is the way we are moving forward. Similarly with Indonesia as well. Okay, they also have a very strong culture that is inspired by Ramayana, Mahabharata. You still have stick plays that happen there in villages that talk about all this, and they are what you call embraced Islam as a modern thing. You go to Philippines, they've embraced Christianity, but they have a very strong mythological level, because they have all these small different islands, each having their own belief system or a version of the older Philippine belief system, right? And so their mythology is also forming, and a lot of them are coming back to their roots to find out what their history was. Now, in between all of this, you have Singapore. Singapore is a modern city. It's a modern country. Singapore on its own does not have a history that it can look at, which is not inspired by Chinese or by Philippine or by Malaysian or by Indonesian. So for Singapore to develop a mythology of its own, it'll take a lot more time, because they don't have a cultural ethos, or a ancient ethos that is intrinsic to Singapore. Yes, they have a lot of stories that is borrowed from Malaysian, borrowed from Indonesian, borrowed from Philippines and Thailand and Cambodia, Vietnam, etc. But something to say that this is purely mythology from Singapore, it'll take a few thousand years more.
That's great. So a lot of countries are now developing in terms of their own mythology, but a lot of countries have developed. And getting back to the Indian mythology itself, although this could be like a controversial topic, but can we dive deeper into what Indian mythology was all about? Because most of the audience who is watching this podcast is, I think, 97% of the audience is from India itself. So can we dive deeper into what Indian mythology was all about? And even I've heard about this concept like different yugas. So can you discuss about that if it is in your expertise as well?
Well, once again, when we dive into the different yugas of Indian mythology, now each yuga, there is a certain number of years that each yuga is, and it's basically okay. Let me break it down into the easiest way how Indian mythology is probably different from all the other mythologies. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all other mythologies are very sequential in its progress. There's a starting point, there is an ending point. Okay, it started. This is how it started. This is how it will end. Okay, so many mythologies believe that there will be a total, complete destruction of the earth. There will be a war that will lead to the end, and that's it. It starts here, it ends here.
Yeah.
No one knows when it will end, but they all know that end of the day, there is something that's going to happen. There are many names for it. There is, for example, Norse mythology. It's supposed to be a huge war between everyone, and everything gets, the name skips my memory right now. But there is a certain point. There is a certain point in Arabian mythology as well that there is a final day of judgment that will happen. Okay, when God will finally be uh, will say this is enough, and he'll come and pass his judgment, and that's where everything will end. Indian mythology, on the other hand, is cyclical in nature. Okay, and that is the core basis for a lot of the belief systems in mythology, Indian mythology. Like the concept of rebirth is because it's a cycle. There is no start, there is no end.
Yes.
Okay, you're probably too young, but if you watch the old B.R. Chopra Mahabharat series, that used to come on TV when I was young, it all starts with "Main samay hoon." Okay, and there's this small portion where he talks about how time is endless, and it repeats itself. So these yugas are a whole part of that cyclical nature. So it starts, it ends, and it begins again. So then that circle completes and it starts again, that is a new yuga. So right now, according to the belief system, we are in what do you call Kalki Yuga. It's the final, supposedly the final yuga where Kalki will come, and that will be the end of the world. Okay, so that's what the belief is. Although I wouldn't know too much on the theory of what happens after that, because once again, if you go by the actual belief system, there should be another yuga that starts after it. But because all of us who are discussing this right now have been part of this yuga, we probably don't have the knowledge as to what's going on next. Maybe we'll find some scripture somewhere once we do a little bit more study as to what happens after this, because we know what happened before.
Yes.
So my understanding is once this completes and the new yuga starts, the knowledge from all these previous yugas will be passed on to the people.
So this
There.
till the current stage, it will be like a mythology for the next yuga.
Not mythology, it'll be like, yeah, this is your history. Because if you look at yugas, it's considered history and it's not considered mythology by going by the belief system. That this is the history, what happened before. Yeah. So it will be passed on to a few individuals who start, the process of repopulating the planet or rebuilding society. This knowledge will be passed on to them. And they will not know when will their yuga end and what happens after that. It's the previous knowledge that is passed on to them and not a future prophecy that's passed on. And that is once again another thing that, I find it's slightly conflicting with some of the other belief systems, is because most of the other belief systems revolve around a prophecy of he will come back. For example, if you look at, let's say, Aztec mythology or Mayan mythology, it all talks about gods who came, Quetzalcoatl, and Inti, etc. They came, they established society, gave us knowledge, gave us wisdom, built huge buildings for them, and they went back, saying that they'll come later. So it's a prophecy saying that they'll be back. And I believe that with us or in Indian mythology, the concept of a prophecy saying that someone will come again to do something is not there, because Kalki also, their job is to end it, and it's confirmed that that's going to happen according to the belief system. So this whole prophecy of waiting for someone to come to end have the next stage happening is slightly contradictory to what the others believe, probably in South America and in some parts of African mythology as well.
So diving deep into the Indian history itself, like different yugas, as you mentioned. So what was the initial thing? Because even I've heard just the names itself, I have not yet dived deep into anything. And even before this podcast, I've never studied about any of these concepts. So this is for the very first time. This is like a new experience for me as well. So what are the different yugas which happened in past, and what was that like?
Well, I wouldn't be the right person to explain that, because how I look at all these things is from a very pragmatic and, academic kind of a level. So to really give you the essence of all the different yugas and what was each of them all about, I think I don't have that level of understanding yet to be
Maybe
able
a
to
bit
say
about
some.
it. Maybe a
Yeah.
bit
So
about it.
a bit about it is, different yugas are, when, society flourished, and then, from a level of when the good dharma
Mm-hmm.
in society starts reducing. So how it all starts is, like I said, it's a circle. So society starts, people learn, people
Mm-hmm.
understand what is dharma, what is good, what is bad, what is evil. People, the good dharma goes up. Yeah. At at a point, at certain point, it reaches its zenith or its highest point where, it could be. Then
Mm-hmm.
slowly, good dharma starts falling because greed, jealousy, all these factors, which are human emotions, tend to increase, because as society grows, you have a small section of society that doesn't as well.
Yes.
So resentment, jealousy, all these negative emotions start building because you see someone else doing better than you,
Yes,
right?
that's true.
So once again, this is from a very layman's perspective that I'm explaining. So once it reaches its zenith, there is nowhere more you can get good dharma, because it has to be balanced.
Mm-hmm.
That's a point where, bad dharma or bad karma starts acting, and, the whole society starts falling in terms of, the virtues in society, and it starts becoming into chaos. At a certain point, it reaches its lowest ebb, where, there's no good left. Everyone is evil, everyone is fighting against each other, there is no good left. And that's when the yuga completes. There's time for a complete, what do you say,
Complete
refresh.
cycle, huh?
Yeah, a complete cycle is complete. You have to refresh it. Some cataclysmic event would happen, a flood, a fire, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Wipe out the whole, human race, or whatever race of animals, etc. What is there, and it
Mm-hmm.
starts all over again. So it's a process of rebirth of society in general, in a
Mm-hmm.
very layman's perspective. So that's why I said, to get the true essence of what each yuga is, and each yuga has its own speciality and its own uh, things that it looked into and it covered. So
Mm-hmm.
for that, you need someone who's actually spent a lot of years studying this, comparing it with the Vedas, what they say, etc. So I don't think I have that, knowledge level to really
Mm-hmm.
dive too deep into the different yugas and stuff.
Yeah, maybe we can dive deeper in some another episodes of this podcast. And getting back to the end of this particular podcast with few more questions, is that in your own field right now, like as I'm 21, so even I am looking forward to learn about what mythology was all about, at least to have a crux of it, what was that all about, just to have a knowledge about it. So what are the possible changes which you are expecting from the audience or from the overall world that they should know about like your career thing, like your mythology path, like what people should actually understand, and what are the things they should take care so that they can prosper into their own life?
See, it's very simple, to be honest. I don't tell people when, people come to me and say, okay, fine, mythology and blah, 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 what is this? I
Mm-hmm.
say, look at it with an open mind.
Yes.
Okay, no one is there to force you to believe something that you don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
Look, if you want to look at it as stories, go ahead. There's amazing number of stories from around the world. Okay, you get to start understanding what people in, let's say, Cambodia thought of a certain element. Or, you will find out that, wow, amazing, in Africa there are these tribes who believe in this creature which is a half hippo, half dinosaur, half lion. My God, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, keep an open mind, the same way that you go and watch a Marvel movie and you see these Captain America, holding a building on one hand and a helicopter in the other, and you go
Mm-hmm.
and clap your hands. But the same thing if Hanuman does, you're like, hey, what is all this, man?
Yeah, that's
you
true.
know so if you want to what you call look at it from a very frivolous or very, surface level, look at it that way. But don't deny that the what you call don't deny the existence of these mythologies. These are stories that's passed down. So keep an
Mm-hmm.
open mind. You don't have to jump into the mythology. And many people find what you call that there is a certain level of lessons that they can get, like we talked about earlier. Some people get that. Some people get can start relating to characters, saying that, my God, this guy, whatever he's gone through in life, I've gone through. Okay. So, they start relating to them and see whether they can learn something from there,
Mm-hmm.
or just treat it as entertainment. But
That's
don't go ahead and, completely deny or say that all this is superstition. Superstition is something completely different. These are stories. If you look at it as stories, and then you just go ahead. Now, some people start believing in these stories. Some people want to believe in these stories. Let them look at these as stories. Look at these as life lessons. Look at this as philosophy. Look at it as entertainment. Look at it as religion. All up to you. But don't deny that they exist, and don't try to cover up, what people from your culture probably did and thought of 2000, 3000 years ago. That's what I tell people, and that's what how I've got people to get interested. So when people come to my website as well, I have people writing to me and saying, "Listen, I never thought that the mythology from my culture would be addressed on the same platform where something like Egyptian mythology and Indian mythology is also being discussed."
Mm-hmm.
Because they figured that it was too small and too superstitious to be considered, because Egyptians had the pyramids, Indians have all these temples built, and I'm from a small island in Philippines, and you talk about this god, which my grandfather used to worship. I never thought that we were on the same level. So, and then you have people writing to us saying, "Listen, no, what you have said is wrong. My parents are actually from this belief system. I actually practice this at home. We actually worship this particular god. And this is not how it's done. This is how it's done." So we get a lot of people coming to us and telling us that we are wrong also. And we go ahead and make those changes. So people who actually practice this or actually spend their life looking into these things obviously have much better knowledge than what we have or what I can get from a Google search. So we
That's true.
incorporate this and we change this. We change articles that we've written. For example, there's a video that we did on this Tibetan flying horse. Okay. So it is spelled Kaylan. So in that whole video, I've talked about Kailan. Okay. We had someone write to us and say it is not Kailan. It is pronounced as Kilan.
Just because of pronunciation.
Pronunciation. So then how as a person I have an option to either take down that video. Okay. But what I did is I put up an apology in the starting itself saying, "I pronounced it wrong. This is the way you pronounce it. Thank you, XYZ, for telling us that this is the way."
Mm-hmm.
So it's a two-way street. When people are open-minded, it's a two-way street. There's an exchange of ideas. There's an exchange of knowledge. If, for example, tomorrow you are talking to someone from, let's say, Indonesia, and you say, "Oh, in our this thing, we have this eagle called Garuda who was part of our this thing." Like, in our history also, we had something called Garuda. And, then you start discussing. It becomes a topic of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, the overall objective of Mythlok is basically to show people that there is more that connects them than what separates them. So I believe that, the more we dig into different characters from mythology, the more stories that we look into, etc., we will find that there is something that connects everyone.
That's true.
And, probably that could be one way to show that, all of us are the same. It's just that we talk about something in a different way. Like water is water, regardless which language you call it in.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And that's really amazing. And I hope that the audience also watches this particular podcast with an open mind as well. And along with that, any last thing which you would like to express about your own career, or maybe the people, those who are willing to explore in mythology part?
Yeah, so those who are interested in mythology, I'm saying dive into it. It's an amazing space. Yeah, there are a lot of things to do. There's a lot of, for example, one of the pioneers who I feel in this space in recent times has been Devdutt Patnaik. So
Mm-hmm.
he's written books, he does sessions on Indian mythology, and he's been amazing. There are so many other people around the world. There's this whole branch of, they call it pseudo archaeology because archaeologists don't believe,
Mm-hmm.
of a belief system called the ancient astronaut theory, which is talks about how they use mythology as a source to claim that gods who people believed in were actually aliens who visited our planet before. There's a
Mm-hmm.
whole different school of thought behind it. Then archaeology, it assists in archaeological findings. So there's a whole lot of things you can do with an interest in mythology. And like I tell people, we as humans, we are a flawed race or a flawed species because there are so many things that limit us. Uh, to give you an example, ultraviolet, infrared, we can't see anything beyond that with
Yes.
our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Because, above a certain decibel, we can't hear things.
Mm-hmm.
Below a certain decibel, we can't hear things,
Yes.
right? And smell, though, is we are very poor in that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Being from a hotel management background, I used to get surprised when a bottle of very expensive wine used to say, "Oh, a hint of cedar with light citrus notes in the wine," and you get this this very subtle taste of pear in it and a slight apricot punch. And I used to taste it and say, "I don't get any of this.
Mm.
I can't smell any of this." Right. So taste and smell, once again, is a very limited factor for us as human beings. The only thing that we can actually do is we can feel.
Yes.
So do what helps, that enhances that. So people never say that I saw God or, I talked to God. Some people claim that, but what they say, I can feel his presence. I can feel the power. I can feel the love.
Yes.
So, when you explore mythology, you might start feeling things. And as a human being, that's your primary uh, go-to sign that it is, helping you, or it is guiding you somewhere. So in this field, from a professional way, there are a lot of sub branches or related fields that you can go through. But if you're looking for a spiritual, or if you're looking for a personal growth, there's plenty you can learn from it as well. So in
Mm-hmm.
my case, I've chosen to, just dive deep into it and see what I can do as my contribution or my legacy that I want to leave behind. Is, like I
Mm-hmm.
said, somehow bring all these characters together on one platform, so that tomorrow all the people from different belief systems also come under a one platform and say, at the end of the day, there's more that connects us and more that connects our, ancestors together than today what we've decided and separated us among each other.
That's great. And even your website also, I had a look at that as well. Even there are a lot of similarities which I experienced through those scriptures itself, through all those blogs and all. And it's really an honor. Once again, thank you so much, Nitin sir, for
Thank
being
you
on our
so much,
podcast
Sahil.
show. And it was really, you can consider it was like a roller coaster ride for me. A lot of concepts went like a speed breaker. But still, I'm gonna watch this podcast again so that I can also understand all the concepts in depth. And as you mentioned, like, be an open-minded person so that you can understand the similarities between all the cultures and all the human beings rather than dissimilarities. And even as you denied with the fact that there are very less dissimilarities rather than the number of similarities. So even I'm glad that we all humans are like, it's like a foolproof thing. Although I believe that every single human being is, although they are unique, but everyone is one itself. Although you can have different religions, you can have different gods, whomever you believe, but humans are one. And it was really a great experience talking to you. And if people are having any doubts, they can definitely reach out to you. And all the social handles and even your website will also be mentioned in the description box. And once again, thank you so much for being on our podcast show. And it was an honor for me. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sahil. Thank you.
Once again, thank you so much for watching this particular podcast till the end. And I hope that now you are absolutely clear about what is mythology, how we can actually take those practices, and how we can evolve as a person, but not forget about our own past, about our own history. And remember this one single thing, that every single human being in this world is one. We are all together one. And not just that, but there are a lot of things which are also breakthrough moment for me. And even this is the podcast which I'm going to go through again and again so that I can also understand all the terms in depth. And please do make sure that below this particular podcast in the description, I have mentioned every single social handle of Nitten Nair, and even his own website, his own blog, with which you can understand and you can dive deep into the mythology of across the globe. So please do make sure you check out his own website, his own YouTube channel as well, where he has dive deep into one points as well. And please do make sure that you take snapshots from this particular podcast and tag me and tag him on Instagram, and text him with the, you can consider, with the breakthrough moments and popcorn moments which you got, so that he can feel that whatever time he invested into this particular podcast was worth his time, his energy, and his study since so many years, and so on. And please do make sure that whatever topics you want me to bring on the guest regarding those particular topics, then please do make sure you can suggest us the topics on which I can bring on the guest on our podcast show, and we can reach out to more and more people. And if you like this particular podcast, then please do make sure that you share this particular podcast with as many people as possible. And looking forward to see you in upcoming new videos and new initiatives and new podcasts as well. Till then, live fully, love openly, and make the difference today. I wish you joy and abundance in all you do.